Welcome to the Devil's Digest postgame show following Arizona State's 72-66 loss here at Desert Financial Arena to Baylor in overtime. ASU now falls to 1-3 in Big 12 play. As always, my name's Justin Lester-Tosa. That's publisher Hunter Bino, and Hode. Kind of just like the Kansas game, this was a game that was a tale of two halves. ASU didn't really get much going for themselves in the first half, but then that second half came around and they were playing with a chip on their shoulder and got back into the game, forced overtime, but eventually it wasn't enough.
Yeah, Justin, I feel like that ASU really needs to learn to put two good halves of basketball together, especially when you play the powerhouses in this very challenging conference like Kansas and like Baylor. As Kansas, as we know, the first half of basketball in that contest was probably the best first half that ASU put together all season long. Then comes the second half where they get outscored to 38-13. You can't do that even at home, let alone on the road. And that was the story of that game. Here in Tempe tonight, I think that ASU played very, very poorly in the first half, scored only 20 points, was in a 12-point deficit at halftime. We're trailing by as much as 15 in the second half. But I think guard Adam Miller really said it best, that just having the intensity, having the focus that was so much lacking in the first half really was the story of the second half, being able to tie that game and send it into overtime. Adam Miller actually was the player that did score the tying basket to send it to an extra frame. And he said there wasn't anything special that ASU did. They were just playing like their hair was on fire. And if that's something that they did in the first half, I think we might be talking about an ASU victory right now, because Baylor is an excellent team. We can all see why this team was ranked in the top 25, I think, up until last week for the entire season. But it's also a team that started out slow. And when you are on your home court, you have to take advantage of all the miscues of your opponent. And especially against a team like Baylor, the margin of error was so small to begin with. And ASU definitely did not take advantage of that in the first half. Second half, they did enough to send the game into overtime. But in overtime, they shot only 20%. Baylor shoots 80% in overtime. And the lack of energy to start the game is something that Bobby Hurley said that he does not want to blame on travel. But he said there were issues with their travel to Kansas, and then coming back from Kansas at 3 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, to have such a quick turnaround and playing this caliber of opponent. It really was a scenario that is not ideal at all. But I don't think Bobby Hurley or Adam Miller or anybody in that Sun Devil locker room right now is making excuses. The energy level has to be there from the get-go. It was there against Kansas, but wasn't there in the second half. And tonight was a reversal. Bottom line, same result.
Yeah, and offensively, it took a while for ASU to get going, not until that second half against Baylor's high-powered defense. And then defensively for ASU as well, they had some good stints and some good possessions, but the amount of offensive rebounds that they sort of gave up to Baylor, who likes to crash the glass, especially on offense, really came back to bite them. What did you see on both ends of the floor from ASU? Yeah,
I mean, aside from lack of energy in the first half, Justin, I just really saw a team that really was very, very, very careless with the ball. I don't think they necessarily had bad shot selection. It was just one of those games where the ball was not going down. So you can compensate that with good defensive play, but that was nowhere to be found in the first half for ASU. Baylor, just an extremely talented team. They didn't really shoot three-pointers by some kind of gaudy percentage by any means, but it seemed like any time that ASU, especially in the second half, was trying to get a little closer, here comes the Baylor three. I really thought that, to your point with the offensive rebounds, Baylor had 15. Definitely a number that you want to see on the stat sheet. And again, that goes back to my earlier point, just really very little, if any, margin for error, because it seemed like every missed shot, and again, it was sometimes in crucial points of the game, there is Baylor to corral the rebound and score, and to just and really create more of a gap. But I think that ASU, was able to really intensify the level of defense. When you look at their fast break points, it definitely was a number that ASU likes to see on their stat sheet as far as 22 points. in the fast break, and we all know that this is a team that really almost lives and dies by their transition offense. So when the transition offense was working well for ASU in the second half, that really did help them. But Baylor's a team that if you put yourself in a 15-point deficit, maybe you can crawl and maybe send the game into overtime, but you have to follow that up in overtime. And as I mentioned earlier, ASU shooting only 2 of 10 in overtime. Baylor shooting 4 of 5 in overtime. I don't know if it's a matter of ASU just running out of gas at overtime, and that's really why they played so poorly again, almost reminiscent of how they played them in the first half. So it's just really just one of those games that shows just the lack of focus and the lack of energy is something that really hurts ASU a lot. This was a game that Deshaun Sanan did come back to action, but Sanan was on a minute restriction according to Bobby Hurley. Only scored 5 points tonight. So when you're dealing with really just a true 7-man rotation, I don't think Sean Phillips and Amir Ali just gave nearly enough off the bench for ASU. That's just another factor that did hurt him. B.J. Freeman was outstanding with 22 points. Austin Mason and Bashir Jihad did score in double figures, although it was again much more in the second half. Performance that they really allowed to do that. But this is a game that if you're not going to get production from the bench, you need Jaden Quaidance, you need Adam Miller to be consistent with their offensive output, and that simply was not there. Again, against a team like Baylor, that's simply not going to cut it. Even though this is not the first Big 12 loss for ASU, I felt that maybe this is the first game where it was the quote-unquote welcome to the Big 12 contest for ASU. Just showing that at home, again, a court where you played really, really well. You have to bring much more to the table when you play a team like Baylor. And tonight, that really was nowhere to be found. Valiant effort to really even tie the game and put it into overtime, but you have to follow that up with overtime. And again, that inconsistent up and down play that we saw tonight against Baylor, that we saw a couple nights ago against Kansas, that's not going to really be enough to really string some wins in the Big 12.
Yeah, and after the game, Coach Hurley and Adam Miller said that this team needs to become more connective, sort of as a unit, and unfortunately that didn't happen tonight for the Sun Devils, but another chance to do so here at home on Tuesday against UCF. What do you expect to see out of ASU from that matchup, and how do you think they should adjust?
Well, again, Adam Miller says that when they play with their hair on fire, good things happen. So that has to happen against UCF here on Tuesday night. UCF is a team that you look record-wise is very, very similar to ASU. I think they might be just a carbon copy, maybe having one win more. They lost in Tucson on Saturday night by 10 points. So they want to salvage something from this road trip. So maybe UCF, in comparison to Baylor, is a quote-unquote comfortable opponent to bounce back from, but it's definitely not going to be a cakewalk. And we talk so much before Big 12 play that this is going to be a so much more challenging league than the Pac-12 ever was for ASU. And right now, with 3 losses in the first 4 games, I think ASU is really feeling this. So I think UCF, compared to other opponents, yes, I would say it's a winnable game, and a game that if you want to bounce back from is definitely more doable than trying to do it against Baylor, even though you played at home. But I think that ASU maybe having that extra days now to regroup at home, don't have to worry about crazy travel schedule or anything like that. Maybe that's actually the recipe for a bounce back win. Deshaun Sanan being healthier and maybe being in less of a minute restriction, maybe that's also something that can really help on Tuesday. But I think this is definitely a time where ASU has to look itself in the mirror, really hard and really long, just to make sure that all the mistakes that we've seen against Baylor, against Kansas, and those are obviously great teams that can force you into a lot of mistakes, but all those mistakes that we saw, Justin, just cannot repeat themselves again against UCF. Again, in comparison, a more winnable game, but the burden of proof is definitely on the Sun Devils.
Well, thank you, Hood, for all your insight. We'll be back here at Desert Financial Arena on Tuesday to catch all the action as ASU hosts UCF. So to stay locked in on all the coverage, go to DevilsDigest.com. All Devils Digest on Twitter at Devils Digest. As always, I'm Justin Lester Tosa. That's publisher Hood Urbino. Thank you guys for watching.